Armor class is one of the core mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons, but I'm amazed that to this day, Dungeon Masters are still getting it wrong. Follow me, I'm going to show you how to break it down for your players. So Armor class is known as a core mechanic in the Dungeons & Dragons rule system. Now, why is it that so many Dungeon Masters and players are getting it wrong? I think this harkens back to the original days of playing D&D, when dice rolling was a simple hit or miss proposition when you're in combat. But Armor class has a lot of minutia, besides just whether or not you hit or miss. In fact, the Armor class stat is a combination of several factors, not just whether or not your actual attack swing misses and cuts thin air. Follow me, and I'm going to explain how it all works. The core mechanic of Armor class is that it's made up of two things in your character creation process. It's made up of the armor that you wear and your dexterity bonus. Now, notwithstanding other factors like spells and equipment, those are the two elements that make up your armor class. And your armor class is how difficult it is for your opponent to hurt your character. Now you notice that I use the word hurt as opposed to hit your character. And that's important because when it comes to actually rolling dice, the first thing you're going to think of is a hit or miss. But this is far from the truth. Armor class by default starts off at 10. Your armor class is then modified by the armor that you wear. Your armor class is then modified by your dexterity. Your dexterity gives it a modifier or a penalty and represents how nimble and fast and agile your character is, thereby making it harder for your opponent to hit. But you notice there that I indicated that it's harder for your opponent to hit you when you have a high dexterity bonus. Let's look at how your dexterity and your armor affect your armor class, but also affect the description that your Dungeon Master is going to use when he describes whether or not an enemy can actually land a blow or hurt you. If you wake up in the morning as an adventurer and you decide to grab your sword and head out into the hills and start adventuring with nothing but your underwear on, you're going to have a 10 armor class. Now that 10 armor class is going to get modified by your dexterity. So if you're a particularly nimble adventurer in his underwear, you're going to get maybe a +1, +2, or +3 bonus, thereby making your armor class 13. Now let's say if your underwear wearing fighter happens upon some goblins in the forest and decides to get into a fight with them. Let's say that that goblin swings a sword at your nimble fighter. D20 roll ensues and it comes up a 12. So stands to reason that that fighter, wearing nothing but his underwear and being nimble, avoided the hit altogether. I mean, otherwise getting hit with a sword in your underwear is probably going to hurt, right? Okay, cool. So that's a fighter wearing nothing but his underwear and being a very nimble guy. Let's take that same scenario and rewind it a bit. Let's say he wakes up in the morning and straps on a suit of plate armor, grabs his shield and heads out into the hills. He encounters that same goblin, but this time that goblin rolls to hit and gets a 12. That 12 does not exceed his armor class, but that fighter now has an extra layer of protection. Does that mean that that goblin missed? Does that mean that that goblin's sword just swung mid-air and failed to connect with the fighter? I would challenge that that fighter probably took that sword hit straight on. In fact, either he deflected it with his shield or it just smashed against his plate armor. The key here is it didn't hurt the fighter. That's the key difference in how you're supposed to explain armor class to your players. It's not a hit or miss proposition. It's, did you get hurt? One of the things that I do in my games when it comes to armor class is, after I've rolled with the monster and determined whether or not the attack was a success or a failure, if it is a miss, I let the player decide how the monster misses. Now you notice that even I am caught up saying the word miss. Let me rewind that back and say, if the result is a failure, I let my player actually decide whether or not it misses the player or whether or not the player's armor class affects the attack roll. Now keeping in mind that when you go into D&D Beyond, it's going to break it down for you. So it's going to show you what your armor class component is based on your dexterity and based on what your armor protection is. Highlight that to the player, let them see, and then give them the decision. The goblin swings his sword at you. I didn't succeed, player, but how would you like your character to avoid getting hurt by that? Did you want the sword to come smashing against your armor and have your armor take the brunt of it? Remember, Dungeons & Dragons doesn't have a component that factors in how much damage your armor can take. So having a sword from the monster actually smash against an armor or shield really isn't going to have any gameplay effect. It's more for style. Or, Mr. Player, did you want to tumble out of the way or sidestep the attack to give it a little bit more of a flair? Let them make the decision based on their character. If a character has a particularly high dexterity bonus, stands to reason that that character is going to be tumbling and moving around the battlefield. Versus a character who's decked out in the best plate armor they can find, they're not going to be as nimble, but they're going to be wading through that like an armored tank. And yeah, they're probably going to be taking these hits, but According to the rules, those hits aren't successful, therefore it doesn't hurt the player. Give some of that agency back to your player, and they might come up with some creative ways to avoid getting hurt in battle. One of my favorite things to do when I'm describing combat in D&D is to let the players know just how much and how valuable that armor was that just saved them from getting hurt. I love describing to the players as a sword swings at them and cuts through the top layer of their leather armor or bangs against their shield. It's those moments of description that make their players realize that, hey, this armor really is saving my life and it's an important part of the game. So don't be afraid to let your armor take some hits, and try those descriptions now instead of just using the hit or miss proposition that you're used to using. Let your armor get beat up, and your players will appreciate it more. I hope you're all having fun playing Dungeons & Dragons out there, guys, and we'll talk to you soon. Before you go, I need your help. I'm trying to grow the exposure of what we do here at Maverick Games. My goal is to actually bring information to parents and students for fun, academics, and even support of neurodivergency. Please subscribe, and make sure you click on those notifications. I don't do paid ads or sponsorships. I hope that you can find content here that's enjoyable for yourself and maybe others. Thank you very much, and thanks for tuning in.